Welcome to the Austin Forum Upload, where we explore pervasive and emerging technologies and their influence and impact on society.
In this series, we upload direct to you information, opinions, and insights from thought leaders, experts, and creatives from Austin and beyond.
They'll share their perspectives through conversations, interviews, debates, discussion, and more.
I'm Jay.
I'm John.
And I'm Houli, and we co-produce the upload for the Austin Forum on Technology and Society. Our guest today is longtime Silicon Valley tech veteran Paul O'Brien, known as S.E. O'Brien on the internet for his extensive past in the search industry. He's also an expert in tech startups and in venture capital economic development. Paul is the founder of MediaTech Ventures based here in Austin, Texas, and he also serves as a director of Founder Institute, a global startup incubator. Paul, welcome to the Austin Forum Upload.
What an awfully nice introduction, Houli. How are you?
I am delightful.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you for having us. And I've got to say, you know, because you presented for the Austin Forum before, that we are devoted into digging into all kinds of tech and following the threads that tech weaves into our culture, into our society, what impacts these have. So I have to ask you about the story in the Austin Business Journal last November, why Paul O'Brien is on a mission to make Austin the Hollywood of media tech.
The Hollywood. Here's the guy from Silicon Valley in Austin trying to make it Hollywood.
Yes.
Well, you know what they say about PR. Any PR is good PR, right?
They did spell your name right,
and they did spell my name right, and there is a hint of truth to that. There's this thesis that I've had on behalf of Texas, not just in Austin, but on behalf of Texas, that what really makes industries and ecosystems work is an identity built around a specific sector. And Hollywood is one of those identities. It's known for the film industry. Nashville's known for the country music industry.
Right.
Silicon Valley is known for a lot of technology. And the thesis that we shared was that in Texas, we need to develop that. We need to ensure that the investment community, that companies, that the world stage, that people who are just trying to figure out where to move and settle and develop a career, that they see opportunities in Austin and in Texas because of how we distinguish ourselves as an economy. Not just as a place to live, not just as a place to love, but because we have a degree of excellence in certain industries, in certain ways. We're not trying to make Austin into Hollywood by any stretch, but that idea helped us establish, I think locally at least, the fact that what we're really trying to do is build from the ground up all that it takes to be as effective and impactful as a place like Hollywood, or as a place like New York in the finance industry, or in the fashion industry, as effective at putting people to work, moving capital into people's pockets through jobs, through investment, and through corporate development, and helping the city thrive by identifying as something distinct in the world.
Well, let's dig down into that a little bit, because most people think of media as a vertical, right? Video, TV, radio, podcasts like these.
Yeah.
But you guys take a broader view. You see it as more of a horizontal, that there are all kinds of points of entry into media tech, not just the ones that people think of conventionally, like turning on their television. What are some other things that you would put in that media tech category that people might not conventionally think about? Great question.
There's an economist that I'm increasingly a fan of by the name of Richard Florida. He's coined the idea of what's called the creative class.
Right.
And he pointed out that about 15 or 20 years ago, only 20% of the economy was working productively and being paid well and so forth in the creative class. But that sector of the economy is growing substantially because it includes technical folks and creative folks. Mm-hmm. But it includes both of those people in the sense that they share skill sets. They overlap. That the creative people with technical skill sets are doing exceptionally well, and the technical people with creative skill sets are doing distinctly and exceptionally well. And Jack Ma at the World Economic Forum just a few months ago pointed out that in the next 30 years, if we're not teaching people these creative and technical skill sets, we're going to have a serious crisis on our hands, because we're automating raw technical jobs, right? We now have AI that's writing code and writing books and writing news articles. And we have creative folks on the art side, in music, in film, who, frankly, because of the way the economy works today, have to have an understanding of the technology involved in what they're doing. And so, yeah, we look at media as a horizontal because in the development of this idea of media technology, what we noticed is that in any given part of the world, people have a different interpretation of what media means. In New York, media is news. In Silicon Valley, media is social media. In Austin, when we say media, people think of music because we're in the live music capital of the world. And of course, in LA, they might think of the film industry as media. And so what we did was we just pointed out that in this creative class, media simply refers to the creative skill sets that are developing content, developing experiences, developing the things that people want to be a part of. And the technology underlying the media is almost ubiquitous. It doesn't matter if you're creating film or music or trying to figure out how to publish a book. The technology underlying all of that is fundamentally the same. And the faster we can appreciate that the technology is fundamentally the same, the faster we can bring everybody up to speed with what the technology is doing to our jobs and how it's changing the way in which our creative class is going to work.
And that's an excellent point, because we've talked offline many times about Austin's creative class and what can we be doing on the tech side, on the workforce development side, to help stabilize that sector, to help give those individuals options as technology changes, but they still are seeking an outlet for the creative voice. And we've talked about workforce development. I was at a Smart Cities event yesterday, and someone was telling me about how some tech companies are keeping an eye on schools and programs as early as 5th grade to see where the future of tech is being shaped and trained. And your quote from Jack Ma is just right, that education today needs to be about teaching people how to be humans, how to be well-rounded.
Yes.
So as you look at MediaTech through that lens of workforce development and being a dad and being an employer yourself, what should we be doing now with working adults, like creatives, to elevate their skill sets so they can keep up with that shifting marketplace? What's our obligation as the people who are maybe out just a tiny bit in front of the next group?
Great question. Two thoughts, particularly with regard to Austin, since that's where so many of your listeners are chiming in from. The first is that I think we've gone too far down the path of STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Too far down the path.
Revolutionary. Hold on, everyone, please hit save on your computers. We've gone too far with STEM. Tell me more.
Well, too far down the path because of that point that Jack Ma was making, that if all we're teaching folks is how to code and how to be an engineer, the reality is that we have bots that are starting to do that for us. And it's a place like Austin where we might embrace and celebrate and promote and evangelize the fact that what we really need to focus on is STEAM, right? With the arts included in there. And I love that schools are trying to do that, right? Schools are starting to recognize that yes, we want to teach children to code, but what do they want to code? They want to code games. They want to code arts, right?
That's what mine do.
They want to produce a music video for their high school band.
Yes.
That there is an opportunity in our youth and through our ISDs and the education system there to, frankly, learn from how we might develop the workforce a little bit more effectively for adults. And that's where my second thought comes from, that in the past 20 years, we've unfortunately diminished the value of a trade school. Right? We've taught everybody that they have to go to college. And if you don't go to college, somehow that's less valuable to society. And in the last few years, we've started to recognize and reinforce that, that's not at all true, nor remotely accurate. Now we have all of these jobs that are not going filled because everybody's trying to get into college, or we have too many people that are spending a fortune to get a college degree only to then not have a productive job because they've not learned a trade. Well, the trades are in STEAM. A musician who can pick up Ruby on Rails is now a musician who has a creative skill set that they can apply to the technology industry.
From the road.
From the road.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, just the idea of treating our workforce in both that creative and technical context is critical. But in another sense, the way to put our musicians back to work, the way to put our filmmakers back to work, the way to put our designers back to work in Austin is to simply teach them the technical skill sets that they need to do a lot of these things themselves, right? Are you a musician who has not built your own website? God forbid, why haven't you? It's not hard. It's not rocket science. There are free tools available to make sure that you as a musician can be much more effective and make a living just because of your talent, your creative talent, simply by doing some of the technical things that are required these days, right? Are you using Facebook effectively? Have you put up a website that actually works? Are you promoting yourself at your local venues by yourself because of the tools and technologies that exist in order for you to do that? If we treat the workforce in a way that we're recognizing that they need both these creative and technical skill sets, we can put everybody to work very, very quickly, or ensure that they're working for themselves very effectively.
Excellent point. That makes me think of I want to go down a little bit different path now, because I'm thinking of conversations where we've talked about creatives being their own startups, right? A band is a company. A band is its own entity.
Yeah.
And it needs the same type of infrastructure as an app or a widget or an artisan beard cream or what have you. So spring is incubator launch season.
It is.
In Austin. And you had posted a really interesting article on Medium last month talking about how startups fail, not just why startups fail, but how startups fail. And in it, you did kind of a meta-analysis of a number of research studies, and then you overlaid it with your personal experience meeting with 20 startup teams in a 48-hour period, thanks to your work with Mass Challenge and Div Inc. and Founder Institute. And you identified a pattern in these failures that didn't hinge on coding or programming or hardware.
Right.
Can you tell us more about what you found?
Right. There's a second economist that I'm a big fan of, and I encourage everybody to read, not because it's an economics book, but because his outlook on the economy and society was profound 40, 50 years ago. A man by the name of Peter Drucker pointed out that only two things create value in businesses. And by extension of business, he's referring to the economy, the local community, the workforce, etc. And those two things are marketing and innovation, right? If we're not being innovative, it's hard to compete. And if we aren't marketing, we have no idea what to do. And his point was that marketing is not selling something. Marketing is not promoting something. Marketing is the work of understanding what's going on in your market. And so if you're a musician, right? If you're a musician, the idea of that startup analogy is profound, because what the work to identify why startups fail uncovered, 20 different reasons startups fail, was that there were about 7 or 8 reasons that were essentially, were fundamentally all about the team. And whether or not the right people were in place to ensure that we're not making mistakes as a new business, right? So if you think of yourself as a band, or you're producing a new film in Austin, or you're developing a video game in Austin, right? Do you have the right people on the team to just not make mistakes that are well understood today, such that we can overcome those mistakes? Do you have somebody in the band? Do you have somebody producing that film that understands the market? Do you have somebody who understands the technology that's available to help you do these things? Do you have somebody who understands what your audience really likes? Do you have somebody who can figure out whether or not you should be playing at a live music venue in West Austin or in South Austin? Or are you just playing wherever somebody's willing to give you $100, which of course you shouldn't be doing, but are you doing that because you're so desperate?
That's a whole other episode.
Right.
Yeah.
The question is, how are you doing that in such a way that you're not wasting time trying to figure it out by having the right people in place, having the right team in place?
And
right?
What did you find when you met with all these startups in kind of this binge episode? Most always fail because they don't do that. They don't have that in place. They don't have the right people in the room to make sure that they're not making mistakes that so many of others have already figured out and worked through. That as a band, you're not looking at Austin and saying, I'm going to play on 6th Street because it's a block away and I know the venue owner there, when the venue at Bee Caves might be willing to pay you quite a bit of money to come out there and play. Well, how do you figure that out? Well, you need to have somebody in the room on the team who understands how to use Facebook or Google or a data platform to figure out where there might be the most interest and excitement in what you're doing. The second thing that startup data
pointed out is that most startups fail simply because they're not collecting the information. They're not aggregating data about their business. They're not aggregating data about their competitors.
Well, talk more about that, because all we seem to hear these days, right, is everyone's got my data. Every time I turn around, somebody's asking me for data. And what you're encountering is that maybe we're not collecting the right elements.
Yes, precisely. And not only are we not collecting the right elements, but we're not then taking it to the next degree of importance, which is insights and then intelligence.
That you can act on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you think about it from the standpoint of a startup or, again, a band, your most readily available set of data comes from your website and comes from an analytics platform like Google Analytics, which is all freely available to put in place.
And you can do it yourself, musicians and artists. You can do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Easily. Not easily in the sense of knowing what to do with it, but you absolutely can build your own online experience and put in place this data platform to start collecting information. Now, the challenge, though, is then you've got all this data. Well, what do you do with it? That's why then you need this team of folks who cares about that stuff, who understands how to look at your website analytics, which, by the way, musicians or filmmakers or book authors, your analytics platform on your website can tell you from where, by zip code, people are visiting your experience. And so you can tell very quickly if you should be playing in downtown Austin or maybe the Domain. Maybe there's a ton of people up north or somewhere else entirely.
Yeah.
You can tell very quickly, immediately, whether or not you have a lot of folks looking at your brand, your experience, your band on a mobile device or a website. And if you're seeing a lot of folks looking at what you're doing on a mobile device, maybe you go invest in building an app for yourself, right? You can see very quickly what keywords from something like Google, what keywords are driving attention for what you're doing. And that might nuance how you position your next show. That might nuance what you name your next album. That might change some of the thoughts you're having about a song you want to write based on what people are looking for and why they're excited about what they're hearing from you.
That's an excellent thing for artists to consider. I was hearing about a band that did put together an app. They had found that most of their traffic was coming through mobile. So they decided to make an app, and they were thinking, well, do we make a game? Like, do they dress us up with hats? What do we want this app to be? And they decided that they would have a dinner in every community where they were going for people who were members of their website, and people would pay an additional fee to get this one-on-one or group-on-one access to these artists that they loved whenever they were in town. The artists had a really mellow, relaxing dinner with tons of support before they ever walked on stage. And they had what amounted to a passive income stream from just making this information available to them and being willing to have hamburgers with strangers. Right. But they never would have known that. It never would have occurred to them if they hadn't collected the data and looked at it and said, how can we act on this? How can we convert this?
Where could we go next and do it again? It's the new fan club, if you think about it. It really is the new way in which our fans are engaging with us as artists and media professionals. And that's what we're trying to celebrate and teach and help develop in MediaTech. That everything we just talked about, Houli, is technology that's enabling this band to be more successful.
It's in service to a larger mission.
And what's exciting is when you think about how that band could do the same thing through VR, and now they could do it anywhere in the world. Would you like to have a private jam session with us? You could pay for that, and we'll do it through virtual reality, right? That's technology. It's hard to understand as an artist whether or not to make those investments in that technology when, one, you don't understand what they cost, what it involves, what it requires, and two, when you don't have people in the room on the team that can help make those decisions with you so that you're not just trying things to try them. You're trying things because you're seeing demand for it. And you've got a circle of peers, a circle of friends. You got folks on the team in the band with you that understand how some of that stuff works so that you can just put it right into place with a form of monetization that changes the way we do business today, changes the way we do business from selling a song on Spotify to engaging directly with your fans through these various experiences that we can develop.
Well, as you say that, I'm looking around this great room that we're in, the startup studio at Galvanize, and inclusion, community, equitable access to resources, those seem to be some of the key values that you personally bring, that you use as a compass to guide your decision making.
Thank you.
Yeah, I picked that up. And it's true, and it's inspiring. So a great example of that commitment that you have to being inclusive, to making sure everyone has access to resources, is the place where we're recording this podcast, the Startup Studio at Galvanize here in Austin. What sparked the idea of, we're the live music capital of the world, so we've got recording studios here, but what sparked the idea for you of a recording studio resource for the tech community, for the startup community?
Yeah, in fact, that we do have a lot of recording studios in Austin. And what struck me as interesting is how infrequently they're used. There are a lot of resources here that are not well known, that aren't being used as frequently as they could be. And so in developing this idea of these startup studios and this minimum viable version that we've got at Galvanize is just that. It's a first.
You heard it here first.
We're
franchise is now available.
We are. We're making them available throughout Austin and frankly throughout the country in the next couple of years. But we're doing that because what dawned on us was that a startup, a business person, a book author doesn't necessarily look at all of these recording studios that are all over the place and think, I should go do a podcast there. Well, that's a music recording studio, and even though it's perfect for podcasting, or there's a great audiobook recording studio at New Republic Studios, film studio in Far East Austin. The film studio's got a podcasting studio in it. People just don't think of going to these kind of places to do this, and therefore, yes, the challenge is these things seem inaccessible, right? I don't know how to put together a studio to start a radio show. I don't know how to record an audiobook. I don't know how to do some sound bites or record a video for my startup. I don't know how to because I don't know where to go. I don't have the resources available. I'd have to pay somebody. Those resources, they're a foundation of that economy. They're a foundation of, to get back to that idea of a place like Hollywood, they're a foundation of what makes that entire ecosystem work. It's hard to have a radio and podcasting industry when no one sees that these resources are readily available and that they're freely available in many cases, so that those who want to just try can get in front of a microphone and give it a shot and see how good they sound on the air and whether or not there's an audience for them.
Well, that's exciting that you were able to connect those dots and then provide that resource to the community. It makes me think, let's dig down into your business model for a second. MediaTech Ventures, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is a holding company, which gives you the agility and the ability to spin off subsidiaries if you're working on a project that really catches fire.
Yeah, and so what is our business model? That's frankly, it's something we're constantly trying to figure out how to simplify with regard to how we explain it, because
I just heard a collective sigh of relief across America that other people are constantly readjusting.
Oh God, you've got to in our businesses, right? We started a few years ago toying around with the various resources that help develop industries and economies. Hollywood was an example of that. I grew up in Michigan, and so the way the auto industry worked and then frankly stopped working in Detroit was a big learning experience, was a good lesson for us. And we started looking at things like airports and how airports are public-private partnerships.
True.
To drive the economy. How do they do that? Well, they put companies in place. They put restaurants in a place. They enable transportation, they enable tourism, they do so many different things in a very unusual business model, right? If you were to say, hey, airport, how do you guys make money? Well, they don't just sell a product or a service. They do a lot of different things in order to facilitate the ecosystem and the economy around that airport. We started looking at ideas like that, a mall, and how a mall is kind of the same thing. It's got a food court, and it's got small stores and big stores, and maybe a mobile app where you can buy something. And right, it's got a lot of different things that they do. And it dawned on us that large corporations like Virgin, like Alphabet, which owns Google and YouTube, like Oath, which now owns Yahoo, where I started my career. Those large corporations are essentially the same thing. They're holding companies. And those holding companies don't build or sell a product in any distinct way. They develop companies. And so what we've been doing in MediaTech Ventures is working backwards, frankly. We started with this holding company model. And we've explored what's called a venture development group. We've explored what's called a startup studio. It's a business model that you might look up. We've explored these different business models as a way to help explain to folks how you can start with a holding company and work backwards. Because most businesses start with a specific product or brand and end up in a holding company. We're going backwards. What if we build a holding company first in order to support the entire industry, the entire ecosystem? And then we can figure out what's missing and develop it. And so what we actually do is we build, buy, or partner with everybody in the media technology ecosystem. We've got about 15 different partners throughout the world already who do similar things to what we're doing. And we've partnered because we can't do it in Pakistan. Somebody else can do it.
How did you find them? Did they find you? How did these connections happen?
Yeah, great question. In fact, Austin was perhaps the most pivotal reason that we've developed these relationships. That in talking about the idea of developing an entity that fosters the ecosystem and the economy and the workforce and investment, the city of Austin, South by Southwest, a lot of the interest in our media and technology ecosystems here started picking up the phone and calling us. And during South by, Australia would come into town, and their MediaTech resources from Australia, they'd come into town, and the city would say, "Hey, have you talked to John and Sabrina and folks over at MediaTech Ventures? Because it sounds like what you're doing there is similar to what these guys are doing here. Shouldn't we all be working together?" And of course, we nod unequivocally and say, "Absolutely. We're just trying to move the capital into the ecosystem." So we do, philosophically, we try to develop 5 things. In this holding company, we're trying to help uncover who all of the people are that have technical skill sets in media. We're building the data set for that creative class, number 1. Number 2, we work in education. We've got a nonprofit entity that's developing the workforce and also developing new businesses, a startup incubator. We've got some real estate plays like this studio. We're developing East Austin rather extensively in the next year because we've seen that most of the media ecosystem, most of the creative class is on that side of Austin. Number 4, we have a whole roster of developers and producers and marketing professionals who we drop into other people's companies to help make them a little bit more effective and efficient.
As mentors or coaches? Or
mostly as mentors and advisors, but to the extent that they need them, certainly as resources. You need a developer. What we put in place is this startup studio business model, which means that for a small piece of equity in the business, we can make those resources available at cost.
Nice.
And that way we can enable other businesses, other new companies, bands, filmmakers, etc., to have access to folks that they couldn't necessarily afford otherwise, just by also taking a piece, sharing a piece in the risk and reward for what we're doing. And then lastly, we have a promotion entity, and that's where that Hollywood narrative came from in the Austin Business Journal. What we pointed out is that if you think of Hollywood really works because of the Oscars, because of Variety magazine, because of the promotions of the industry itself. And so to what extent can we help develop those promotions of this ecosystem so that the investors, the companies, the people looking for work know where to do that, know where to go find that work and put money to work in the ecosystem.
So let's say this podcast goes viral and thousands of MediaTech startups start to contact you and saying, we want to be a partner with MediaTech Ventures. How do you guys, in general, how do you figure out what's the next big thing? What ideas have potential? What is a good partner organization? You might be a great product, but you're not right for MediaTech. What does it take to get into the MediaTech Ventures stable?
Yeah, great question, because there are actually 2 different ways to answer that. First is that in working with us directly, keep in mind that our role is development of the industry. And so we're not investing in or working on behalf of the next streaming platform for video. We're not working with directly those companies or products that are consumer applications in the industry. We're working with the stuff that helps buoy the entire ecosystem. So we're working with technology companies that are looking at data aggregation of sound engineers. We're working with the streaming infrastructure, SaaS platforms that enable someone to produce a podcast very, very easily and very simply and effectively. We're looking at the ways in which content marketing and social media work together to foster more audiences for the content media and social media industries. We're looking at that infrastructure layer. It's kind of the way to think about it. That we want to build and buy and partner with stuff that makes it easier for people that have consumer startups or people who are musicians or people who are filmmakers to use technology so that they can be successful.
That makes sense.
A way to think about it is that our customer is the investor. Our customer is the capital market, whether that capital market is a company or a public fund or a state fund or a federal fund or a venture capitalist. That's who we're serving in MediaTech Ventures. That's the most important way to engage with us. That said, the incubator that we're developing, the global partnerships that we're developing enable us to provide to a new business who's just trying to bring something to market a great many resources that they wouldn't otherwise have, right? If you're starting a VR tech in Austin and you'd really love to get connected with Dublin because you know that they're doing some great work there, absolutely reach out to us. We can help you connect there. If you're looking for investment in that, we've got an incubator model, we've got resources, we've got an investor network, so we can very easily put money into those kind of things to help you be successful as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an innovator in the ecosystem. So think of it in these two different ways, right? In what way is what you're doing support of the industry at large? Then we want to talk directly. In what way is what you're doing something that's new to consumers or new to the market? In that context, we'd want to talk about how we can help you.
Thank you, not just for this interview, but thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a person with access to this information and the motivation to share it with as many people as possible. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thank you for sharing this beautiful studio. And we look forward to hearing many more great things about MediaTech Ventures as you continue to grow into the alternative to Hollywood.
Houli, it has been a privilege. I am so honored to be on the show. I'm excited for Upload.
Thanks.
I'm glad you're in the startup studio with us. I'm looking forward to the next forum, the Austin Forum on Technology and Society. That to be frank, is that effort, that initiative that you've had with that program and that model is driving a lot of this personal passion, right? If we can just show folks how society and technology work together, we can develop this future together in Austin and make sure that everybody is working passionately, productively, efficiently, and finding time for their family and their music and the things that they love. I know we can do it. We're going to get there soon.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Forum Upload. You can listen to additional episodes and check out a schedule of our monthly in-person events at austinforum.org. The Upload is a production of the Austin Forum on Technology and Society, a nonprofit organization here in Austin, Texas.